The phone rang at 11:52 on a cold Tuesday night, and I remember the time because I'd just wound the kitchen clock, the way I did every night before bed. My shoulder had been stiff all day from splitting firewood, so I was sitting in the recliner with a heating pad instead of sleeping. Wind rattled the old barn door outside, the way it always did in late October. I almost didn't answer. Hannah rarely called after 10. When I picked up, there was only breathing. Then a whisper, "Dad." Something in her voice pulled every muscle in my chest tight. "I left," she said. I finally left. I didn't speak right away. 31 years of raising that girl had taught me that silence sometimes gave a frightened person room to find her own words. I'd learned that the hard way, back when she was 7 and wouldn't tell me for 3 days who'd pushed her off the swing set at school. Some truths need space around them before they'll come out. Then I heard it. A door handle rattling. Someone pounding. "Hannah," I said quietly. "I'm at the Shell station on Route 9. I'm locked in the restroom." Her voice cracked. He followed me. I'd met Derek maybe a dozen times over the 2 years they'd been together. I never liked the way he shook my hand. Too firm, too long, like he was proving something to a room that wasn't there. Ellen used to say a man who needs you to notice his handshake is usually compensating for something you haven't found yet. I should have listened to her more carefully. I usually did, but not enough that time. "You locked the door?" "Yes." "Good. Stay on the phone with me." Outside, a man's voice muffled through the phone's speaker. "Hannah, come on. You're being ridiculous." Another bang against the door. "Where exactly?" I asked, already reaching for my truck keys off the hook by the mudroom. "Route 9, near the old grain co-op." "Dad, what if he gets in?" "He won't. Stay where you are." "I'm coming." My old Ford had 180,000 miles on it, and a heater that took 10 minutes to do anything useful. Ellen used to tell me I'd drive that truck until it dissolved into rust and stubbornness. She'd probably been right about that too. As I backed out of the drive, I glanced toward the barn, where the brass lantern hung by the door, glowing the way it had every night for the 4 years since she'd died. "Leave it lit," she used to say, back when the cancer had already taken most of her strength, but none of her stubbornness. "So the place always looks like somebody's home. So if anybody ever needs to find their way back here in the dark, they can." I hadn't understood then that she might have meant Hannah specifically. I understood it now. I pressed the gas harder than I should have on wet roads. Hannah stayed on the phone almost the whole drive. Sometimes neither of us spoke. Sometimes I heard Derek's footsteps pacing outside the restroom door. Sometimes his voice going soft and reasonable, like a man auditioning for a jury that wasn't there. "He keeps saying he's sorry," she whispered. "Do you believe him?" A long pause. "No." "Then don't open that door." "I should have left months ago." "No," I said. "You should have left the first time he made you afraid. But you're leaving now. That's what matters." Silence on the line. Then, quietly, "I know." 23 minutes later, I pulled into the gas station. The rain had eased to a drizzle. Derek stood near the pumps with his hands in his coat pockets, hair combed, boots clean, the kind of calm that only exists in men who've never once doubted they'd get their way. When he saw my truck, he smiled wider. I climbed out slow. My shoulder complained. Growing old teaches you to hide what hurts from anyone looking for weakness. "Mr. Doyle." He said it like we were old friends. "This is just a misunderstanding." I said nothing. "Maybe you could talk some sense into her." "No." His smile tightened, just barely, like a man recalculating. "Sir, couples argue," he tried. "Sometimes people overreact." "They do. So maybe you could convince her to come out." "No." For several seconds, neither of us moved. A woman hurried past us into the store carrying a sleeping toddler. A trucker filled his tank without paying either of us the slightest attention. Ordinary life kept moving while my daughter's whole world had nearly come apart behind a locked door 20 feet away. The restroom door opened. Hannah stepped out slowly, mascara streaked, carrying only her purse. For one terrible second, she looked like the 6-year-old who used to climb into our bed after nightmares. She crossed the lot in 3 fast steps and wrapped both arms around me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You have nothing to apologize for." Derek took one step forward. Hannah. She flinched. That flinch told me more than an hour of explanation could have. I shifted so I stood between them without making a show of it. Derek noticed. His expression stayed pleasant. His eyes didn't. "You'll regret this," he said, quiet enough that only I could hear it. Maybe he meant it to sound like concern. It didn't. I opened the passenger door of the truck. "Get in, sweetheart." Derek didn't chase the truck, didn't shout. He just watched us pull out, arms crossed, smiling like a man filing something away for later. That unsettled me more than shouting would have. Halfway home, Hannah finally spoke. "I thought I could fix him." "You can't fix someone who doesn't believe he's broken." She stared out the window. "I didn't tell you because I was embarrassed." "I know. I thought you'd think I was stupid." I reached over and squeezed her hand for just a second. "You made it out. That's what matters tonight. The rest can wait." When we turned up the gravel drive, the lantern was still glowing through the mist over the barn. Hannah managed a small smile. "Mom always kept that lit." She did. Her phone buzzed on her lap. Unknown number. She opened it before I could stop her. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." She went pale. I took the phone gently from her hand and stared at the words for a long moment, then looked up at the lantern glowing over the barn door. Somewhere out there, Derek believed fear belonged to him. He had no idea patience had belonged to me for a very long time. I should explain something about that lantern, because it matters to everything that happened after. Ellen and I bought this farm the year we got married, 34 years ago. 40 acres, a falling down barn, and a house that needed more work than either of us could afford, which meant we did most of it ourselves over the following decade. She taught kindergarten for 26 years in town. I worked for the Postal Service, not delivering mail, though people always assumed that when I told them. I worked in the inspection service, investigating mail fraud, threats sent through the postal system, extortion schemes that crossed state lines using nothing more sophisticated than an envelope and a stamp. It sounds almost quaint now, in an age of anonymous texts and burner numbers, but the patterns never really changed. Men who wanted to frighten someone from a distance, who wanted deniability, who wanted to test how far they could push before anyone pushed back. I did that for 31 years. Ellen used to say I brought my work face home some nights without meaning to. The watching, the noticing, the refusal to take anything at face value. She said it like it worried her a little. She was probably right to worry. She got sick 8 years before she died, and spent the last 2 knowing it was coming. In the slow, deliberate way pancreatic cancer takes its time announcing itself before it finally does what it came to do. In that last year, she started leaving the lantern on every night, even in summer, even when neither of us said why. I asked her about it once, near the end, when she was too tired most days to leave the bedroom. "It's not really for us," she said. "It's for whoever needs to find their way back here someday. You'll know when it's for." I didn't understand what she meant until the night Hannah called me from that gas station bathroom. Some things a person tells you years before you're ready to understand them. By morning, the frost had settled thick over the pasture. Hannah slept in the guest room. I didn't sleep much at all. I sat at the kitchen table with my reading glasses low on my nose, her phone beside my coffee, and a legal pad in front of me. Old habits don't retire just because a man does. I wrote down the time of the call, the name of the gas station, the exact wording of the message, every detail before memory started smoothing its edges. That habit had saved more cases than I could count over the years. The certainty that memory lies to you gently, a little more each day, unless you write it down while it's still sharp. At 6, Hannah came down wearing one of Ellen's old flannel shirts. "You kept this." "Hall closet." She sat across from me. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a rooster next door made noise like he owned the county. "You're writing it down," she said. "Yes. I don't want this to become some big thing." I took off my glasses. "Sweetheart, a man sent you a death threat." Her face tightened. "I know what he sent." Then it already became something. She looked away, and that's when I saw it. Not fear exactly. Shame. The quiet kind that makes a person apologize for having been hurt. I hated Derek for that more than for the message. "He didn't start out like this," she said. They never do. She told me slowly, in pieces, the way people tell you things they've rehearsed not saying. How he'd brought her coffee at the office every morning that first month. How he'd remembered small things she'd mentioned only once. Her favorite tea, the name of a dog she'd had as a kid, the fact that she hated when people chewed with their mouths open. How he made her feel, for a while, like the only interesting person in any room she walked into. He made me feel seen, she said. I know how that sounds now. It mattered, I told her. That part was real, even if what came after wasn't. She nodded slowly, like that was something she'd needed someone else to say out loud. Then, slowly, how it started to shift. He corrected things. Her clothes. Her friends. Her tone on the phone with her own sister. He said my coworkers didn't respect me, she said. Then he said Marcy, my best friend since college, was a bad influence, that she was jealous of what we had. Then he wanted my passwords, because couples shouldn't have secrets from each other. She laughed, small and bitter. I run a nonprofit that teaches financial literacy to teenagers, Dad. Half my job is teaching 16-year-olds to recognize predatory lending and manipulation tactics. I know what a controlling relationship looks like on paper. I still missed it. You didn't miss it, I said. He moved the line an inch at a time. That's how it's designed to work. Nobody hands you the whole thing on day one. If he had, you'd have walked out the door. She wiped her eyes fast, like she was embarrassed to have them. He checked my bank statements. Not every day, just enough that I knew he could. He'd ask why I spent $11 at the coffee shop near my office, why I drove to the north side of town instead of straight home, why I didn't answer during a meeting. My hand tightened around my mug. She noticed. Please don't be mad. I'm not mad at you. She stared toward the window. I don't even know who I am right now. I hadn't planned to say what came next, but it came anyway. I know men like Derek. I mean that specifically. She frowned. Dad, you worked at the post office. I did that. For 31 years, in the inspection service. Threats through the mail, extortion, stalking cases that crossed state lines. I chased men who wanted power over people from a distance, who wanted deniability built into everything they did. The kitchen went quiet. You never told me. Your mother knew. Of course she knew. Hannah sat back hard. All this time, I thought you did paperwork and processed claims. Some of it was paperwork. Most jobs like that are more than people think. But I learned the shape of men like him. I learned it for 3 decades. She looked at me like I'd confessed to a second house somewhere. I understood. A grown child doesn't love discovering rooms inside a parent she thought she already knew completely. Did you deal with men like him? Yes. The word came out heavier than I meant it to. Men like Derek don't want love. They want ownership. And when ownership slips, they call it betrayal. They call it disrespect. They call it anything except what it actually is, which is losing control of someone they never should have tried to control in the first place. Her phone buzzed again. Both of us looked down. A photo. Her office building. Taken from across the parking lot. Caption, easy place to find you. She pushed back from the table so fast the chair scraped. I can't go to work. You can. You will. But today, we make it safe first. By 9 I'd called Deputy Sam Reyes, a man I'd known since he was a nervous kid riding along with me on a mail fraud stakeout 20 years back, half convinced every parked car on the street belonged to a suspect. He'd grown into a steady, thorough officer with 2 kids of his own now and a patience for tedious paperwork that most people twice his age didn't have. He stood in my driveway scrolling through the messages on Hannah's phone. I'm taking this seriously, Walt. I figured you would. I'm not cutting corners because it's you. I'd be disappointed if you did. He turned to Hannah, his voice softening. Miss Doyle, save everything. Don't respond, don't delete. If he shows up here or at your office, you call 911. If he shows up anywhere near you at all, you call. Understood. She nodded. You got cameras? Not enough. Today's a good day to fix that. By noon, my brother Frank showed up in his rattling Chevy with a toolbox, 2 lawn chairs, and a bag of sandwiches from a diner in Millbrook he swore was better than anything in 3 counties. Frank moved like a man built from spare parts. Bad knee? Worse hip, a shoulder he'd wrecked falling off a roof in 1994 and never quite let heal right. But he could still wire a security camera faster than most men half his age. Heard we're doing surveillance now, he said, climbing out. Brought lunch. Figured a man can't properly defend his family on an empty stomach. Hannah smiled for the first time all day. It wasn't much, but I took it. Ruth Alvarez came over from next door an hour later. Retired court stenographer, 61 years old. The kind of woman who noticed everything and forgot nothing. Who'd spent 30 years transcribing testimony and had an ear for exactly which details mattered. She carried a notebook and the expression of someone who had already made 3 lists. Put one by the barn, she told Frank. That oak throws a blind spot after dark. And another at the mailbox. That's a natural place for anyone to loiter without looking suspicious. Frank looked at me. She always like this. Always. And correct, Ruth said, without looking up from her notebook. For the next 2 hours, my property turned into a quiet little operation. Frank mounted cameras at the drive, the barn, the side gate, the mailbox. Ruth checked angles from her phone, walking the property line the way I used to walk a scene, noting where headlights would sweep across the yard and where a man might stand if he believed darkness made him invisible. Hannah followed me once, barefoot in old sneakers despite the cold. You really think he'll come here? I think he wants you to believe he could. That's not an answer. No, I admitted. But it's the truth. That evening we ate sandwiches on the porch, paper plates balanced on our knees. Frank told a story about dropping a transmission on his foot in 1989 and trying to convince an army doctor he could walk it off. Ruth laughed despite herself. Hannah almost did too, for a few minutes at a time, and for those few minutes Derek didn't own the air around us. Then night came. The lantern clicked on with the timer I'd rigged years earlier, and everybody on the porch got quiet, the way people do when something ordinary suddenly feels important. The next morning, frost sat heavy over the yard. Something small and silver caught the light near the barn door. My stomach dropped before my mind caught up. I bent down slowly, my shoulder aching as I lowered myself. It was a bracelet, thin silver chain, small charm shaped like a compass. I'd given it to Hannah the day she graduated college, told her it was so she'd always find her way back, no matter how far she wandered. She'd worn it under her gown at commencement, and Ellen had cried through every photograph. Already sick by then, but hiding it well that day. The clasp on the bracelet was broken. Behind me, Hannah said, "Dad." She saw it in my hand and went white. Derek had been on the property. Not shouting, not breaking anything. Just close enough to leave a message. Close enough that no camera angle we'd set up the day before had quite caught him doing it. A gap Ruth would spend the next hour cursing herself over, though it wasn't her fault. We'd only had the system running since noon the day before, and he'd apparently come sometime before that. I closed my fist around the broken chain. The anatomy of a man like that is simple. He tests a boundary, then waits to see who's afraid to enforce it. By 8, Ruth had pulled up what footage we did have on her laptop at my kitchen table, one hand on the mouse, coffee gone cold beside her. The mailbox camera, installed just before dusk the previous evening, had caught something after all. At 2:47 a.m., a dark pickup rolled slowly past the drive, circled back a quarter-mile down the road, and returned with its headlights off. A figure got out, put up, and crossed the yard in a way that suggested he'd studied the layout beforehand, moving with the kind of unhurried confidence of someone who didn't expect to be interrupted. He climbed the porch steps, set something down near the door, and stood there, nearly 15 seconds, staring at the front door like he wanted the camera, wherever it was, to see him do it. "That's not a man trying to win her back," Frank said quietly, setting down his coffee. "No," I said. "That's a man building pressure. He wants her scared enough to come back to him before he has to do anything louder than this." Hannah looked between us. "You don't know that." "No," I agreed. "But men like Derek don't usually invent themselves overnight. This isn't the first time he's done something like this. I'd stake 31 years on it." That sentence started the paper trail. I spent the rest of the morning doing what people imagine looks dramatic and what actually looks like nothing at all from the outside. County property records, civil court filings, old business registrations, address histories. It's tedious work, the kind that takes patience most people don't have anymore in an age of instant answers. Hannah sat across from me writing her own list, one item at a time. The first time he'd asked for her passwords, the night he'd put his fist through his own drywall and blamed her for making him do it. The time he'd shown up unannounced at her sister's baby shower because he said he didn't trust who she'd be talking to there. Every so often she'd stop writing, then remember something else, and look ashamed all over again. Put it down, I told her gently. It sounds stupid written out like this. Put it down anyway. Patterns only look obvious once somebody writes them all in one place. At 11, a name surfaced in the property records, Nora Whitfield, Ashland. A dismissed protective order petition, 3 years old. Dismissed didn't mean false. In my experience, dismissed usually just meant scared, or exhausted, or talked out of it by a lawyer who didn't understand what she was up against. Derek's old business address, a small property management company he'd run before the one he worked at now, sat 2 blocks from Nora's former apartment complex, the same year the petition had been filed and withdrawn. Not proof, but enough to ask a question. Ruth still had contacts from her stenography days who knew people who knew people. Nobody broke any rules, nobody shared anything private. But by early afternoon, we had an old business number Nora had once used for a small cleaning service she apparently no longer ran. Hannah stared at the number on my legal pad. You're going to call her? No, I said. You're not ready for that conversation yet, and she may not want to have it at all. So we ask, carefully, and we let her decide. We tried twice. No answer either time. At 6:03 that evening, a text came through. Who is this? I wrote back carefully. My name is Walt Doyle. My daughter recently left a man named Derek Voss. Your name appeared in a public court filing from 3 years ago. I won't contact you again if you don't want that, but if you're willing to talk, it might help keep my daughter safe. 3 minutes passed, then 5. Then the phone buzzed. Is she safe right now? I looked at Hannah. She wants to know if you're safe. Hannah swallowed and nodded. I typed back, yes. She's with me. The next message came almost immediately. Meet tomorrow. Not at my house. The Millbrook Diner on Route 62. 10 a.m., bring another woman. I don't meet strange men alone anymore. Ruth read it over my shoulder and nodded. Smart woman. The Millbrook Diner sat off a busy stretch of highway, wedged between a tire shop and a place selling firewood by the cord. It smelled like bacon grease and old vinyl booths. A waitress called everyone Han, whether she knew them or not. Nora Whitfield arrived 7 minutes late. She was a thin woman in her early 40s with tired eyes and a green raincoat buttoned all the way to her throat, and she paused in the doorway to scan the diner the way a person does when they've learned, the hard way, that danger doesn't always announce itself. Ruth lifted one hand. Nora came over but didn't sit right away. Which one's your daughter? Hannah raised her hand slightly. Nora looked at her for a long second, and something in her face shifted, not pity. Recognition. She slid into the booth across from us. Did he take your phone yet? Hannah's eyes filled. He tried. Nora nodded like that, answered 3 questions at once. For a while we let her lead. She stirred sugar into coffee she never drank. He's wonderful at first, she said. Makes you feel like the universe finally sent one man who understands you completely. Then he starts correcting your life, your clothes, your friends, your family, your tone of voice. Did he tell you your dad was controlling you? Hannah looked up, startled. Yes, all the time. He always needs a villain, Nora said. Someone else to blame for why you're finally seeing him clearly. She told us Derek, under a different last name back then, a detail that made Ruth go very still and start writing, had done the same thing to her over 18 months. Gifts, apologies, tears, promises. Then isolation. Then, when she finally tried to leave, threats disguised as concern. When I tried to leave, Nora said, he told my co-workers I was unstable. He recorded pieces of arguments. Always the pieces where I sounded upset, never the parts where he'd provoked it, and showed them around like proof. He posted things online, vague enough that nobody could quite call it slander, about being abused by a woman with, quote, untreated mental health issues. I filed for a protective order, she went on. Then I withdrew it. Hannah leaned forward. Why? Nora's hand tightened around the spoon. He sent me a photo of my dog in my own backyard. The next day, a photo of my mother walking into her church. He never said a word about either photo. He didn't have to. I understood exactly what he meant. I dropped the petition 3 days later. Ruth muttered something under her breath. Nora gave a small, humorless smile. Exactly. Hannah cried quietly. The waitress came by and pretended not to notice while refilling coffee nobody was drinking. Nora reached across the table and put one hand over Hannah's. You're not crazy, she said. That's the first thing you need to hear. Everything he made you doubt about yourself, that was never actually about you. Before we left, Nora agreed to write down what she remembered in as much detail as she could stand to, dates and specifics, and to keep the door open if it came to more than that. It was more than we'd had that morning, and considerably more courage than most people would have offered a stranger's family. That night, Derek's truck rolled past the house again, slow, headlights sweeping across Hannah's bedroom window and holding there a beat too long before moving on. I stood in the dark kitchen with one hand on the counter, every old instinct telling me to walk outside and let him see me, to make him understand exactly whose porch he was circling. But that was precisely what he wanted, a reaction, a clip, a witness who'd only ever see the last 10 seconds of whatever happened next. So I stayed where I was. My shoulder ached. My hand ached from gripping the counter frame too hard. I hated feeling old in front of my daughter more than I hated almost anything else that week. I hated needing restraint more than I'd ever needed strength. But I understood his plan now, the shape of it. He was telling people I was dangerous, an obsessive old man, a retired postal worker playing detective, harassing an innocent guy who just wanted to talk to his ex. He wanted me angry first, on record, before he made his real move. So I sat down at the kitchen table, swallowed 2 aspirin with cold coffee, and saved another video file to the growing folder Ruth had set up for us. At 11:18, Hannah's phone lit up. A video. It showed her from earlier that day, outside her office building, wiping her eyes beside her car. The message underneath read, "She still needs me. Tomorrow I'm coming to bring her home." Hannah looked at me, terrified and exhausted in equal measure. I looked toward the lantern glowing over the barn. "Then tomorrow," I said, "he can meet everyone." The next evening, every light on the property was burning before the sun had fully set. Not for a statement. So every camera would see clearly, from every angle, whatever happened. Frank carried 2 folding chairs out from the garage. "You know," he grunted, setting one down beside mine. "When I retired, I figured excitement meant finding a good deal on motor oil." "Life had other plans," I said. "It usually does," Frank agreed, easing himself into the chair with the particular caution of a man whose knees had opinions about the weather. Across the yard, Ruth adjusted the angle on one of her own porch cameras, aimed toward the road. She wasn't hiding what she was doing. Neither was I. If Derek wanted witnesses, he was going to get more of them than he'd bargained for. Hannah stepped outside carrying a tray of sweet tea. She looked steadier than the day before, though there was still hesitation in every movement, the particular caution of someone who'd learned to expect a door to open unexpectedly. "You don't have to stay outside," I told her. "I know. I've spent 2 years hiding inside. I'm done with that." That sentence stayed with me the rest of the night. At 7:40, Deputy Reyes parked half a block away, close enough to respond quickly, far enough that nobody could later claim he'd come to intimidate anyone. He climbed out and walked over. "Expecting company?" "I think so. Armed. My coffee's still hot." He nodded once. "I'll take that as a no." He looked around the yard. Frank, Ruth, Hannah, the cameras at every corner, everything visible, everything legal. Good setup. Wasn't built overnight. No, I agreed. It wasn't. He glanced toward Hannah. If he steps onto your property after being told to leave, say it clearly, out loud, so it's on every recording. And don't touch him. Understood? I won't. I know you won't, he said to me, and walked back toward his cruiser. The neighborhood settled slowly into evening. Sprinklers clicked on somewhere. A dog barked down the road. Someone was grilling. It felt strangely ordinary, which was exactly what I wanted it to feel like, right up until it wasn't ordinary at all. At 8:16, headlights appeared at the end of the road. A dark pickup. Hannah stiffened beside me. You can go inside, I said. I'm staying. The truck rolled to a stop at the end of the drive, engine idling. Nobody got out for almost 30 seconds. Then Derek stepped onto the pavement, wearing a clean flannel shirt, the same calm smile I'd seen at the gas station. Phone already raised, recording. Evening, he called out. Nobody answered. He started walking toward the porch, still smiling, still filming. Hannah. She didn't respond. I just came to talk. Frank leaned toward me. Funny thing. Every man who says he just wants to talk usually means everybody else does the listening. I almost smiled. Derek reached the bottom step, turning his phone to capture the whole porch. Look at this, he said loudly into the camera. Her father actually organized an ambush. He laughed softly. I've never seen so many retirees in one place. Frank raised one hand. Son, I've had a hip replacement that scared me more than you. Even Reyes, watching from down the street, lowered his head for a second to hide a smile. Derek ignored the comment. His attention returned to me. Mr. Doyle. I folded my hands together. Derek, you've been telling lies about me. No. You've been contacting people, trying to destroy my reputation. No, I said. I've been collecting facts. Something flickered across his face, just for a second, then vanished behind the smile again. Hannah. His voice went soft. You know this isn't who your dad really is. Hannah stood up. Her knees trembled, but her voice didn't. You need to leave. He ignored her completely, kept talking to me instead. You're making her afraid. I almost admired the nerve of it, rewriting reality out loud while every camera on the property watched him do it. No, I answered slowly. She was already afraid. You made sure of that a long time before tonight. You weren't there. No, but she was. Hannah's eyes filled with tears, not from fear this time. From finally hearing someone believe her without asking for proof she shouldn't have had to provide in the first place. Derek climbed the first porch step. I just want 5 minutes. No. Another step. I deserve to explain. No. A third step. You can't keep her from me. I stood slowly, my shoulder protesting the whole way up. Derek, you can leave tonight as a free man. He stopped. Or you can stay here and let every person watching, including your own phone, record you ruining your own life. For the first time all evening, his confidence slipped. Only a little. He recovered quickly. You think you've trapped me? I don't think anything. I know some things. He looked around. Ruth on her porch, Frank in his chair, Hannah by the door, 2 neighbors who'd quietly stepped outside after noticing the commotion down the street. Nobody shouted, he said, almost to himself. Nobody's going to, I said. This isn't an ambush. It's accountability. Derek laughed. You people really planned this. We've had plenty of time, Frank said mildly. Derek took one more step. His foot crossed the edge of the porch. I pointed toward the sidewalk. You're trespassing now. He looked amused. Really? I haven't done anything. You've been asked to leave. He lifted his phone closer to my face, angling it so the live stream caught everything. This crazy old man, threatening me. He said into the camera, loud enough for the microphone. Deputy Reyes started walking up the drive, unhurried, professional. Evening. Derek turned immediately, smile widening. Deputy. Perfect timing. I was hoping you'd show up. I've been here. Good. Then you should hear this. He reached into his jacket, slow and deliberate, and produced a second phone. You know what's funny? I recorded Walt Doyle threatening me 2 nights ago. I figured eventually I'd need it. He tapped the screen. I think you should hear this. Reyes extended his hand. I'll listen. Derek handed it over with complete confidence. I didn't move, didn't protest, didn't explain. Frank glanced at me. You okay? Yes. You don't seem worried. I've learned something over the years, I said, keeping my eyes on Derek. When a man believes he's already won, he usually stops checking for the truth. Reyes pressed play. The porch fell silent. Static, a truck door closing, then my voice, clipped and out of context. I'll handle you my way. You've pushed this far enough. Hannah looked at me, stunned. Dad. Reyes raised a hand without looking up from the phone. Let's hear all of it. Derek's smile widened. There isn't much left. The recording ended. Silence settled over the porch. Even the crickets seemed to have gone quiet. Reyes looked at me. Ray, Walt. You want to respond? I do. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. Derek's expression flickered. My copy. My porch cameras record everything near the front door, including conversations. Not just the last 30 seconds of them. Convenient, Derek said. It is. I agreed and handed the drive to Ruth. She connected it to her laptop on the porch table. The same conversation appeared on the screen. Reyes stepped closer. This the original? Yes. Anybody can edit a file, Derek said. Ruth didn't look up. So can you. Let's just play it. The first few seconds matched Derek's version exactly. My voice, his, the same background noise. Then it kept going, past where his recording had cut off. Derek's own voice, much clearer than before. Go ahead, say something angry. Come on, old man. Tell me what you're really thinking. A pause. Then my voice, calm. I'm thinking you should leave my property. Derek's voice again, needling. No, that's boring. Say you'll handle me. I remembered that call now. Remembered him baiting me for nearly 10 minutes, trying to get something usable. My voice, finally, I'll handle you my way. Derek's version had ended there. The original kept going. My way means every camera, every report, and every legal option available. Because Hannah deserves to live without looking over her shoulder for the rest of her life. Derek's smile slowly disappeared. Ruth paused it. Back up 10 seconds. She did. Right before the cut, a faint jingle played softly in the background. The 7 o'clock spot break from the AM station I kept the kitchen radio tuned to, the same ad that ran at the same time every single evening. In Derek's version, that same jingle jumped straight into the next morning's traffic report. Reyes leaned closer to the speaker. Play that section again. She did. Interesting, Reyes said. A live radio broadcast doesn't skip 12 hours in half a second. Frank chuckled. Radio ain't that fast. Nobody else laughed. Derek shifted his weight. It could have been a different station. It could have, Reyes agreed evenly. Let's keep listening. Near the end of the recording, footsteps, a truck door, then Derek's voice, farther away, almost too quiet to catch. That should be enough. The porch went completely still. You forgot to trim that part, Reyes said. I don't know what that means. You want to keep telling me you didn't edit anything? Derek opened his mouth, closed it again. Just then another car pulled up, a silver sedan. Linda Marsh, the principal at the school where Hannah ran her after-school finance program, climbed out with a folder under her arm. Sorry I'm late, she said, then looked at Derek before continuing. Mr. Voss came to our school 3 separate times after Hannah asked him not to. Our security footage shows him waiting in the parking lot for over an hour last Tuesday. I was bringing flowers, Derek said. Linda ignored him and handed Reyes several printed photographs. Then another car, Nora's, though she hadn't planned to come. I could tell by how long she sat in the driveway before finally walking up. I'd like to make a statement, she said. Derek actually took a step backward. I think you've mistaken me for someone. No, Nora said, her voice steady. I made that mistake exactly once already. She stood beside Hannah, not in front of her. Beside her. He isolated me from my family. He recorded arguments and edited them. Then he told everyone I was unstable. Reyes wrote quietly in his notebook. Derek looked around the porch, and everywhere he turned, another piece of the story had arrived before he could rewrite it. Then his own phone buzzed in his hand. The live stream, still running, hundreds of comments scrolling past. People had been watching the whole thing. His attempt to paint me as a dangerous old man had become a live broadcast of his own story falling apart in real time. He ended the stream immediately. Too late. Reyes stepped forward. Derek Voss, based on what I've seen tonight, along with prior reports on file, I'm placing you under arrest pending charges of criminal trespass, harassment, intimidation, and evidence tampering. Additional charges will depend on the investigation. Derek's face went pale. You can't be serious. This old man set me up. Cameras don't set people up, Reyes said, and turned him around, placing him in handcuffs. Henna began to cry quietly, not because Derek was being arrested, because for the first time in a long while, she wasn't wondering whether anyone would believe her. As Reyes guided him toward the patrol car, Derek looked back one last time. His smile returned, smaller now, more desperate than confident. This isn't over. The patrol car door closed. Its taillights disappeared down the road. 2 weeks later, I sat at the same kitchen table when the mail arrived. Among the bills and grocery coupons sat a thick envelope from a law office in the city. Henna looked over my shoulder. What is it? I opened it carefully. A civil demand letter. Derek intended to sue me for harassment, emotional distress, and defamation. Henna's shoulders sank. Oh no. I read the last page, then folded it neatly. Frank looked at me. You worried now? I couldn't help smiling. No. Why not? Because he finally put everything in writing. 3 weeks later, I stood outside the county courthouse with a paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold. Late spring in this part of the country carries that particular mix of humidity and fresh-cut grass. Henna stood beside me in a navy blazer she usually saved for board meetings. She looked nervous, not frightened anymore. There's a difference. Fear makes you want to run. Nerves mean you're staying. You okay? I asked. I think so. You don't have to be perfect in there. I know. You only have to tell the truth. She took a slow breath. I can do that. For the first time in months, I believed her completely. Derek arrived 10 minutes later in a dark gray suit, fresh haircut, polished shoes. A man who could pass on the street for a respectable professional if you didn't know the story. Appearances had always been his strongest weapon. He spotted us, adjusted his tie, and walked inside without the smug smile I half expected. Maybe his lawyer had finally convinced him that charm wasn't evidence. Inside, the courtroom felt smaller than television makes it look. No dramatic speeches, no crowds, just wooden benches, quiet conversations, stacks of paperwork, and people waiting for ordinary justice to do its ordinary work. The hearing lasted nearly 3 hours. Not because anyone shouted, because the truth takes time when it's built one page at a time. Derek's attorney argued I'd organized a campaign of harassment against his client, that I'd contacted former acquaintances, damaged his reputation, intimidated him deliberately. Then our attorney stood. She didn't raise her voice. She simply opened 3 thick binders, one at a time. The first held printed messages. The second, photographs, timestamps, camera stills. The third, transcripts, witness statements, certified copies of public records. Facts don't sound dramatic on their own, but stacked together, they become surprisingly heavy. Ruth testified first, explaining how the cameras worked, how the recordings stored automatically with unbroken digital timestamps. Derek's attorney asked if she disliked his client. I didn't know him well enough to dislike him, Ruth said. I only know what the cameras recorded. Nothing more, nothing less. Reyes testified next, explaining that he'd treated both parties equally from the first night. You've known Mr. Doyle for years, the attorney pressed. Yes. And that influenced your investigation? It influenced me to be extra careful not to let it, Reyes said. That answer seemed to carry particular weight with the judge. It certainly did with me. Nora testified after that, describing the pattern in careful, steady detail, the gifts, the isolation, the edited recordings, the photographs meant to say what words never had to. Derek never once looked at her. Finally, Hannah's name was called. She glanced at me. I nodded. She didn't need me to answer for her anymore. She walked to the stand alone. Her hands trembled taking the oath, but once she began speaking, her voice steadied. She talked about checking her phone every few minutes because he expected instant replies, about apologizing for things she hadn't done, about losing touch with friends because explaining him had become exhausting, about a locked bathroom door and believing, in that moment, that she had nowhere else in the world to go. The courtroom stayed quiet. Nobody interrupted. Nobody asked why she hadn't left sooner. For the first time, she was allowed to tell the whole story, start to finish, without anyone deciding halfway through that they already knew how it ended. Near the close, our attorney asked one final question. "Miss Doyle, what changed?" Hannah thought about it for several seconds, then smiled through tears. "Leaving wasn't the hardest part," she said. "The hardest part was believing someone would believe me." She looked toward me, then back at the judge. "I'm not afraid to tell the truth anymore." I felt something loosen in my chest that I'd been carrying since 11:52 on that cold Tuesday night. Not relief exactly. Something deeper. Peace, maybe. After a short recess, the judge returned with his ruling, spoken calmly, without anger or sympathy, just the law. He found the evidence of repeated harassment, intimidation, unwanted surveillance, and manipulated recordings credible and well-supported. The edited audio significantly damaged Derek's claims. The independent testimony strengthened the overall pattern. The request for continued protective measures was granted. Derek was ordered to have no direct or indirect contact with Hannah. Additional criminal proceedings would continue separately. Derek lowered his head. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked like a man who had run out of stories to tell. Outside the courthouse, there were no reporters, no cameras, no applause. Life simply continued. People walked back to their cars. Someone laughed across the parking lot. A delivery truck rumbled past. Justice rarely feels like a movie. Most of the time it feels like paperwork finally catching up to the truth. Hannah stood beside me on the steps. "It's over." "The legal part isn't completely over." She laughed. "I know." Then she wrapped her arms around me. "Thank you. You don't owe me thanks. You did the hardest part yourself." The following Saturday, we fixed the loose railing on the front porch together. Frank supervised from a lawn chair, contributing almost no actual labor. "I've reached the age," he announced, "where giving advice burns fewer calories than using a screwdriver." Ruth called over from her yard. "That's because you haven't given good advice since the Clinton administration." I distinctly remember one excellent suggestion in 2004. "What was it?" "I told Walt not to buy that ugly recliner." Hannah laughed. "He bought it anyway." "And it's still ugly," Ruth said. For the first time in months, the laughter sounded completely normal. Nobody forced it. Nobody needed it to hide anything. It simply belonged there again. As we tightened the last bolt, I leaned against the porch post to rest my shoulder. Hannah noticed. "You should let me finish. I've still got a few good years left in this shoulder." She smiled. "I know." I looked up at the lantern above us. "I can't fight every battle for you anymore, sweetheart." She shook her head. "I don't need you to. You already taught me how." That hit harder than I expected. I reached over and squeezed her shoulder. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" "When life gets dark." She glanced up at the lantern, finishing the thought before I said it. "Leave the light on." Exactly. In the months that followed, Hannah started something new alongside her regular work. A small evening program at the community center, unofficial at first, just a room and some folding chairs, for women who wanted somewhere to talk without being told what they should have done differently. Nora came sometimes, when she felt up to it. Ruth helped her set up a quiet, careful system for keeping records. The same instinct for documentation that had helped us 3 months earlier, now turned toward helping other people build their own paper trails before they needed them. I didn't go to those meetings. That wasn't my place anymore, and I understood that clearly, without any bitterness attached to the understanding. My part had been the porch, the cameras, the legal pad, the years of habit that happened to be useful exactly once, at exactly the right moment. Hers was what came after, turning one terrible year into something that might spare somebody else the worst of it. That evening, after everyone had gone home, I carried 2 cups of tea onto the porch. One for me. When I sat quietly beside the old rocking chair that had been Ellen's, the way I still did most evenings, more from habit than sorrow at this point, though it was probably some of both. The crickets sang from the trees beyond the yard. The neighborhood settled into another ordinary night. The lantern glowed over the barn door just as it had every evening since my wife asked me never to let it go dark. For a long time, I thought protecting the people I loved meant standing between them and every danger that ever came near. Now I understand it sometimes means standing beside them until they're strong enough to stand on their own, and then stepping back, just slightly, so they can. If you've ever had to stay calm while protecting someone you love, then you know exactly how difficult that can be. I'd love to hear what you would have done in my place. And if this story reminded you that patience and the truth still matter, thank you for spending this time with me.